Welcome to the Whole Pack, where we challenge black and white thinking and holistic pet care and dive into the controversial topics everyone's thinking about but nobody's saying out loud. I'm Sunny Gandera.
And I'm Melissa Sherman, and we are two holistic pet health practitioners here to prove that holistic care can include critical thinking, self-care, and yes, even Western medicine when needed. This is a judgment-free community we wish we'd had when we started our journey.
Welcome back to the Whole Pack. I'm Sunny Gandera.
And I'm Melissa Sherman.
We're so glad you're here for episode 2. If you missed episode 1, we go back and listen because we shared our personal journeys and Melissa shared her incredible story about going from the corporate world to now having a successful pet health coaching business. Worth a listen for sure. So thank you again for being here. Today, we're diving into something that I think is going to challenge a lot of what you hear in the holistic pet health space and maybe even some of what you believe right now. And we're going to be talking about something called bioindividuality. We'll talk about that a little bit later and what that specifically means, but really why these cookie cutter protocols, even if they're holistic ones, because there are, can actually do more harm than good and may not help your pet, right? Because sitting here as holistic practitioners, we pride ourselves on looking at the whole animal. That doesn't mean that, we turn around and say all dogs should eat raw, never vaccinate, or grain-free is always better. So those are just some blanket statements that don't account for the individual in front of us, right, Melissa? So what are some of the most common cookie cutter protocols you see in the holistic pet health world?
It comes down to supplements, but I think a big one is probiotics. And I know early on, even before I was doing this professionally, I was giving my dogs probiotics and I was seeing maybe not the results I was promised. And I was like, what is going on here? Why isn't this working? This is supposed to help. This is supposed to improve their gut. And, for Denny, my dog that I talked about in the first episode, it really, it did him a disservice more than anything else. And I thought, oh my gosh, he's on antibiotics. He needs to be on a probiotic. He has digestive issues. Like it made sense logically. He should be on a probiotic. However, when I saw him declining even more and he would have worse diarrhea, that's when I started questioning some of this. But I think that's the one that sticks out the most is it's something very simple. But if you listen, a lot of people say like every dog should be on one for the rest of its life. And I don't believe that to be the case.
Right.
How about you? Do you have any experience with anything?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all make mistakes, right? Because we want to do what's best for our clients, and we believe, I have an example of a dog that he was like 8 years old and terrible IBS issues. And I was like, oh, he was on kibble. Let's get him onto raw food. And he didn't do well on raw food. And I was like, well, wait a little bit, a couple of days or a couple of weeks, no, did not get better. Goes to show that some dogs, who have, I mean, many of you know this already, perhaps as pet professionals, if you're listening, but, older dogs don't digest raw food as well. And so I started putting him on a gently cooked diet and miracles happen. But the idea is that we need to look at the animal in front of us, right? Like what, and you have to pay attention to the symptoms, to what their basically their poop looks like, their energy, their eyes, all of that tells you something about that specific dog. So what we said in the beginning, what works for one dog or cat doesn't necessarily work for the other. And this is why we believe in that very, very individualized care that, we are going to discuss more about in the podcast about, there could be the best, most expensive supplements in the world that doesn't translate to a healthy dog. And first and foremost, we do need to tackle nutrition, but also in many other ways, like Melissa, your work with energy. How is your energy? How is the household's energy, right? So there's so many things to take into consideration. And I will say that if you're doing, the cookie cutter approach and just using herbs and holistic modalities, you're basically just trading that for the Western meds, right? I mean, you're not really looking at the whole. So that's really what we would talk about a little bit here, that can be very confusing for not just pet parents, but pet professionals, right? Because we just want to help.
And I think that's a good point. If we back up just a little bit, what is holistic care? What is it meant to be? What does it look like? What does it mean to you? Because I think we do get away from that, especially when we're working with pet parents that are newer to this. They're looking for a natural option. You don't want to just replace. We're not looking for allopathic care. We're not looking to just treat the symptoms. We're looking to support the animal as a whole. And that is what holistic care is the
Mm,
whole. We're looking
yeah.
for the root. We're looking, what is their constitution? What makes them run? What's going on with them individually? What's their lifestyle? What's the household energy? What's the energy of their guardians? I mean, you got to look at the whole picture, because as soon as we just say, I don't want to give X drug, and what can I give instead? And I know pet parents get frustrated with me when I'm like, well, it's not that easy. And we try to
Yeah.
like peel back the layers, and it's like, well, we got to start here to get here.
Mm,
Sometimes you have to use that conventional medicine alongside the natural medicine to until it catches up. Because as you
absolutely.
know, right, in TCVM, it can take a little bit for those herbs to really start showing a change, the support that you're looking for. Where
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, I think we share this. We don't want our animals to suffer. And I think sometimes we see that people have gotten away from, they're so afraid to use certain things because long-term use can cause kidney problems. Okay, but what is short-term use? Will it stop
Mm,
them from being in excruciating pain until something else can help? So I think for me, I like to look at the balance of things, like what makes the most sense, but looking at the animal as a whole, because at the end of the day, letting them suffer because we're scared of something else, that's when we have to
mm,
step back and really educate ourselves on what's benefit and reward out,
mm,
and the risk is what I'm trying to say. The risk and reward is weighing
right.
those rather than just saying nope, nothing. So
Absolutely. And if I may interject, the
yeah.
pet professional also needs to really respect and honor the pet parent because they know their dog 10 million times better than you do. No matter how much we think we know, it doesn't trump being with that animal day in and day out and really getting to know them. So listening is very powerful. And even if it contradicts what you may think, sometimes I find that, you know what, that's the best route to go. But I just wanted to summarize also about the whole concept of bioindividuality for those who listen that may not be a holistic practitioner or maybe a pet parent, because pet parents will listen too. But, the concept is that every body, every animal has unique nutritional needs based on their age, breed, activity level, as you mentioned, health history, constitution. You mentioned TCVM, traditional Chinese veterinary medicine. Try to say that 4 times fast. We take it even further, right? So we look at food energetics and constitutional types. So is your dog hot or cold? Does he seek out, warm spaces or cold? Is he damp? Is he dry, excess or deficient? These are all these terms, and we choose foods that balance those tendencies. And I'm doing that right now with my own dog, Tofu, who has been, has a pododermatitis. Poor thing. She can barely walk on her legs, but she is a cool dog. She likes warm. So you don't want to give her too many cool things like duck and rabbit and certain vegetables like cucumber or celery. But however, she's also experiencing heat because of her. So this is very tricky. So then you have to think, well, now I may have to give her some of those cooling foods initially to offset that, and then eventually put her back on those warming foods, right? So again, it sounds very complicated, but it isn't if you really just listen to, first and foremost, the pet parent, obviously, but also like guiding yourself. And you are very good at that as well with your intuition and what is best for that particular situation. And that is so hard for us sometimes as practitioners to honor, right?
Yeah, and it's about slowing down and being present. Because I think, before I was doing this professionally, I think one of my biggest complaints is nobody was listening to me. They were just fixing the problem, right? They had this standard of care and okay, this will fix the problem, but they weren't listening to the problems that I had. And I think as a practitioner, that's one of our most important roles is being that person. And I know myself, I've been told you're the first person that listened to me. Like it is so important to actually listen to what is going on instead
Mm,
of making all these assumptions, because if we're making all those assumptions, we are doing cookie cutter care. We're not thinking it through.
mm,
We're jumping to conclusions and fixing. And as a practitioner, as a holistic practitioner, we're not fixers. We're holding space. We're listening. Listening is so important,
mm,
but it gives us our next steps. If we've heard what's going on, now we can say, this dog is this. This dog eats this right now and it's doing this. Their poop looks
mm.
like this. You know, we can go through those things and take all of that together to help create a plan to move them forward in their support.
Absolutely. And, I think if we are too rigid as practitioners, we're installing this fear in pet parents that if they don't follow this exact protocol, they're failing their dog, right? I mean,
Right.
I kept thinking when you were talking as a chef, I've learned to sort of taste and adjust. I never just follow a recipe blindly, right? I adapt on what I'm seeing. How is this dish, developing? How is it smelling? How is it tasting? And nutrition, is the same. We have to stay flexible and curious. And I think that's probably one of the key reasons why we wanted to start this conversation, this podcast, because so many aren't, right? When they're like convinced that their way is the best way, and then we really miss out on a lot of these nuances that could really help our clients, right?
Right. And it's natural, right? For humans, when something works, we want to just jump up on a soapbox and scream it to the world to
Yeah.
help as many people as possible. So, like, it's natural and there's no shame in that. It's just about still remaining open, listening to these individual stories, but being able to come back to it. I love your analogy about cooking and tasting and adjusting as you
Mm.
go because it's such a great visual as to what we're doing.
Yeah. And I think that we just have to stay humble as practitioners. And I think that's a very important point. I think we both agree on that we don't have all the answers, but we need to, as you were saying, be better at listening and also asking better questions, right?
Mm.
Like what should all dogs eat? It's like, what does this dog need right now, right?
Right.
Instead of like, what's the best diet? Because I get that all the time from
Yeah.
clients who are coming like, what should I feed my dog and how much? But I rather say, well, what's your dog symptoms? Like, what is he going through? What's this issue? And so we look at certain things like energy levels, coat quality, things like that, right? Digestion. I mentioned stool or poop before.
Yeah.
And so that type of, though, all of those things are clues. And then honestly, like it's a bit of an experimentation too, right? I mean, we have to test something out. And if it doesn't work, we adjust. But having an ego as a practitioner and calling ourselves, oh, we know it all, we have all the answers, I think is very dangerous. And I think that, by having these conversations, we can keep an open mind and really learn a whole lot more than when we're just waiting for our turn to speak, right?
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Mm. Mm. So, what would you do? Like, say if you had, really convinced that based on everything you've, uh, monitored and witnessed and heard about your client, like what if something isn't working? What would you do?
So when something isn't working, I mean, I'm asking the questions like what are they seeing? What are
Mm,
they observing? So that's an important layer of it too, is you really want to write this stuff down. You want to encourage your clients to journal. Sounds like they're writing a lot, but really just write the date, what happened that day. I
mm,
also encourage them to write down their own moods on certain days because
mm,
a lot of times, if things are not working, or, I work with a lot of cats, so they may not be taking the new
mm,
food.
mm,
I'll talk to the person too, but like, what are you doing? And
right.
then sometimes I have to work with them on their energetics, on their mindset, on what they're doing. And this would apply to dogs too. You know, how many dogs are picky eaters?
Mm,
And if we're going in with, they're not going to eat this, they're never going to eat this, I don't even know why I'm trying this, and you put the food in front of them, and weird, what do? They don't eat it. And then you're like, I knew it. I knew it. I
Yeah.
just proved it. So we're kind of making it about ourselves, but how do you pull yourself out of that and say, oh my gosh, they're going to eat this. This is great. It's delicious food. And so changing their mindset too in order to go through this. But if it is, they have their energy's good, they're doing all the things right, and still something's not going, I'll pull back. We'll go back to where they were stable and try another direction.
Mm.
It doesn't mean it's over. It feels like a setback. Sometimes it can be disappointing to people. Um, but to see forward progression, sometimes we do have to take a couple of steps back, slow down,
Mm.
change the projection. Like maybe we're going somewhere else than what we initially thought. How about you?
Yeah, I would add also, something controversial too for those that are so holistic that they can't even imagine this. But working with a convention, your vet, whether it's a conventional or holistic one, it's like I partner with a vet who's happens to be an integrative vet, but also practices all kinds of medicine, right? But I feel like, we need both perspectives. So if a dog has a serious health condition and we can't seem to do, we need diagnostics, right? We need blood work. We need that professional medical oversight. So I wouldn't undermine that, right? I mean, holistic approaches, what we do, enhance that care, right? They don't replace it. So that's what we want to be very clear about as well. But it's about integrating each other. It's about bringing the best of both worlds together for the individual animal, because maybe I overlooked something that those diagnostics could tell me too. Even though it's blood work and it's a shot in time, there's so many ways we can support each other as professionals and working with veterinarians as well. But everything you said as well, of course, just paying attention to that animal, every little like little story tells you something, right? So and it's about just keeping to it. And remember what we said when we were introducing ourselves and our story is like there's always options, right? There's always something we can do to help our pets. So keeping that in the back of my mind, knowing that, okay, just because this didn't work doesn't mean now everything's over. There's nothing more we can do, right? So that
Right.
that is important, I think.
I agree. Yeah.
I also wanted to say, like in addition to trusting your observation and your client and the animal, just gather information, but don't get it from someone else's dog on Instagram, right? Not the
Yeah.
dog in the Facebook group or the influencer's dog, but your dog. Like, and that again comes back to that bio-individuality, because I see so many people like, oh my gosh, my dog is bleeding out. Like, what should I do? I'm like, take him to the vet. So,
Yeah.
you
There's
know,
just some things we can't do at home,
right. Yeah.
that's when you need to have the discernment.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's not that extreme,
Right.
but
No,
we
I
do
just,
see that. I mean, we do see that. So,
mm,
but having that discernment as to when something, maybe there's an acute bacterial infection and it needs you need to do something conventional for that. Otherwise, it's going to get worse and more things could start happening. And I think, there's such a fear of using any kind of conventional medicine for anything that
absolutely.
we let our dogs and cats unnecessarily suffer because of that fear. But you're doing more damage than if we did, let's just say, an antibiotic, for example. If there's something, a tick-borne illness, you're given an antibiotic to help with that initial infection.
Mm-hmm.
That is going to help prevent long-term um, damage.
Right.
It could get worse. So using that and knowing that through diet and through other means, we can help rebuild their gut. We can help them get back on the right track. It is going to be a setback, but it's going to help them. They're in an acute medical need for something conventional.
Absolutely. And and then those herbs that we love can help rebuild, the gut and all of that. But, the acute care, don't sleep on that. That's very important as well. So that's a great point, Melissa. This has been such a rich conversation. I really feel like, I'm hoping that it gives people permission to question things, to experiment and to trust themselves and their animals. Like if you think something's off, most likely it is. And just because we are professionals don't mean that we always have all the answers, but we are here, as Melissa said, to listen, to support you. You are not alone. And as a pet professional listening, that should be your first role, is to really remember back to when you were struggling with something with your animal and didn't get the support you needed. well, that's now your role, right?
Right. Exactly. Is
Mm,
just stepping into that, authority is a strong word, but it's a very important role to be able to help orchestrate what's going on with our animals and our clients'
mm.
animals.
And maybe you disagree with what we're talking about and how we are presenting this. So that brings me to episode 3, which is coming soon. And that is going to be called Disagreement with Grace. Like, how do we have conversations respectfully when we don't agree with other practitioners, other approaches, or even our clients' choices, right?
Yeah, I think it's really important because there's so much information out there and it's very that black and white thinking of my way or the highway. If you don't agree with me, I'm blocking you. Like there's no discussion. We don't know how to have these discussions anymore. So that's what we're really going to talk about in episode 3 is how to have a disagreement and still talk to each other, still be civil and respectable to each other.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I can't wait for that conversation. And for everyone listening, we'd love to hear from you, of course. Have you experienced bioindividuality with your own pets? Have you had to pivot from a protocol that everyone said was the right way? We'd love to hear your stories, and we might share them in a future episode. So don't forget, you can also find us on social media at The Whole Pack on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. See you guys next time. Before we go, we want to remind you that the information shared on the whole pack is for educational purposes only and is not intended to replace veterinary medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult with your veterinarian before making any changes to your pet's diet, supplements, or healthcare routine. Every animal is unique, and what works for one may not be appropriate for another. We're here to empower you with knowledge, but your vet is your partner in your pet's individual care.